answering your questions and diving a little deeper. This is the Midweek Rewind.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Midweek Rewind. Grateful for you spending some time with us today. For those of you watching live on Thursday, hello to you. And maybe you're watching live or later or listening to the podcast. Thank you for spending some time with us. Hey, Brent. Greetings from down the hall.
Howdy. Howdy, howdy.
How's it going today?
Going good. I really enjoy most days. I love Thursdays and just trying to get some sermon stuff cranked out and got a couple meetings, but it's a good day.
Awesome.
And I sit here and look out at the blue sky and the green grass, and it's nice.
Yep.
Good day.
It is indeed. All right. Well, Brent, we're going to talk about something kind of different today, but before we get to today's kind of main topic, first of all, again, if you're watching live, of course, we'd love to hear from you. If you have any questions, we'll do our best to answer them. So if you're live, we'll keep an eye on the chat here. But Brent, we're in the middle. Actually, we just started this new sermon series, How to Family. It's been one that I think you and I have been looking forward to. We've been talking about young families for a while. Looking forward to continuing that. And along with that, we have some kind of extra stuff. So this past week, we kicked it off on Sunday. And then on Wednesday, last night, we had our first How to Parent workshop with Matt Gallagher. Matt's great. He's a great counselor, and I think he has a lot of really wise teaching. And so we had some people join us both in room and online last night for the workshop. And they've got the AMA thing, the Ask Me Anything for young couples. We'll maybe kind of come back to that and give provide a little bit more information as we wrap up today. But it's a great series. I'm looking forward to continuing it. And I hope everybody watching, please do join us on Sundays if you can. We're also Wednesday nights with Matt Gallagher. It's a really great time. So we're not going to spend a ton of time today on this week's sermon because that's kind of what we did last night. So if you were with us, again, in person or watching online, Matt kind of led us through further discussion on passive parenting and how to avoid that, how to be intentional, kind of looking at the model of King David in the Bible. So instead of you all hearing me and Brent ramble on about that again, we're going to switch it up a little bit. But Brent, do you want to say anything real quick about the series or about on Sunday or Wednesday?
Yeah, just looking forward to it. One of the things that I'm trying to lead our staff in and our church is a dedication to reaching the younger generation. Everyone matters. We're going to continue to offer programming and resources from womb to tomb, but we are committed and are elevating our focus and our strategy on reaching young families, young adults, married or not, kids or not. And so part of this is rooted in that. And so, yeah, I'm excited about it. I think it's going to be a great series. It's always challenging to me to say, oh, what about my parenting? What about my grandparenting? This coming Sunday is all on discipline. How do you discipline? Why do you discipline? What about, the controversial stuff of spanking, or how's it work? What's the goal? So it's going to be practical. And then, of course, we got Matt each week diving deeper. So it's going to be a good series. Looking forward to it.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. It's really, really practical, really great information for parents, whether you're a young parent, an older parent, or if you're not even a parent yet, but hope to be someday. Or Brent, on Sunday, you mentioned maybe you help with Sunday school, or maybe you're a teacher, or really a lot of this is going to be helpful no matter what stage people are in.
And a word I've been trying to use is influencer. As a preacher, every Sunday when I get up, I have these thoughts, not out of deep insecurity, but just thinking person thoughts. Will anyone just write this off with the first sentence because they say that doesn't apply to me? And whenever you do a marriage series or a parenting series or a family series, you do ask the question as a leader, like, what are those who aren't in that category going to say? And will they just mentally write it off? And so I'm trying to use the word influencer. All of us are influencers over the younger generation, nephews, nieces, neighbor kids. I mean, your influence may be minimal, but you have influence over your neighbor's kids that are running through your yard and you're talking and they're, so influencers. But without apology, it's dealing specifically with parenting. Just don't want anyone to write it off. It's good stuff for everybody because we're all influencers.
And as always, we're using the Bible, right? So yeah, it's biblical teaching, whatever stage of life you're in. So
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, well, Brent. So yeah, we don't want to rehash too much since we've already done that. And this is actually your idea. You wanted to talk about something kind of different today. We'll come back around and we'll talk about kind of some of the future plans we've been talking about today. But why don't you start us off, Brent? What was your topic you wanted to discuss today? Why don't you start us off, lead us into where you want to head today?
This is called the Midweek Rewind, and so usually it's rewinding the last Sunday's sermon, and we're giving you a couple chances on that. So yeah, I was just thinking earlier this morning, it would be interesting for Matt and I to maybe open the window or pull the shades on this subject of church in a COVID world, and to give you a glimpse from our perspective as leaders here at the church of what we're thinking and the questions we have and about church in the COVID world. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, Matt and I are going to jump into that. And so I'll toss out a starting reflection as an insider that is a pastor leader here at the church. COVID, and then we had 3 months shelter at home and only online. And now we're at a third of our normal attendance or so. Mm-hmm. But COVID has forced us to evaluate how we're doing church.
Yep.
And to evaluate how effective. And we all have a tendency on some issues, certainly, to become defensive. Mm-hmm. And I think our staff has been very transparent and honest in asking some hard questions. Like, do people even miss church?
Mm. Yeah, it's a hard question.
If people are content to only watch online and they show no hesitancy to be out in public for all kinds of other things, but choose not to meet publicly. And I'm not judging motives. I'm just saying you look at them and they're out and about everywhere else, but they don't want to come here. There's not a judgment there. There's just the question, have our services not been compelling enough? Do they even miss them? So I don't know. That's my first question. What do you think? Where do we go from here? This is a good question for leaders.
Yeah.
How effective have we really been with big church on Sunday?
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that, Matt?
No, I mean, it's hard. And I don't think we're going to know probably for several more weeks or months how this will really all play out. One thing that's interesting. So I'm not trying to do like a self-plug here, but I'm also involved with the USMB podcast, the lead pod thing that USMB does. And so I actually talked to Kyle last week, Kyle Goings from here, and he's all about the stats of next generation and all that kind of stuff. He loves all that information. And so one thing that Kyle said, which I think kind of plays into this, is he was speaking specifically about millennials and Gen Z and kind of future casting a little bit, but he was saying how we're probably going to see fewer and fewer cultural Christians because of COVID, because of just how culture has changed. There's probably going to be fewer people who go to church just because that's what you do on Sundays. Like there's going to be, since we've had this interruption, that kind of gives people an easy out. And like you're saying, maybe they realize, oh, maybe I'm doing just fine without going to church, and maybe I don't need it. So there's some people who might fall into that camp, which is bad. That's sad. We don't like that, right? But the good part, the silver lining is, well, again, I'm probably misquoting Kyle, but he was talking about how the people who stay in the church and who stay devoted and stay in on this are going to be probably even more fired up, more passionate than they've ever been before. So there's going to be a little bit of a gap, I guess, of the culture of Christians might be a little less involved, but those who stick around might be more passionate than they've ever been before. We don't know for sure, but that's an interesting thought that I think is possible.
I think, we always should be cautious in our prognosticating and our forecasting. And right. We're all, as I've told our staff, every pastor, every leader of an organization used to lead at least partially out of their experience. So you face a situation, you say, what did I do last time?
Yeah, right.
None of us have any experience in leading a bank or a business or a store or a restaurant or a church through a pandemic. And so there's just an element of humility that we all need to have. Having said that, I agree. The shelter at home is going to separate, and I'm going to use some words here, and I don't mean it carte blanche or all the way across the board, but it's going to separate the casual Christians from the more committed Christians. Now, please don't over-interpret that or judge that. There are lots of reasons that people are staying home that are healthy and right reasons. So I'm not saying everyone that no longer comes back to church is lazy, but I do agree with Kyle. This shelter at home, this gap, as you called it, this season that we're in, we're gonna see lower attendance, but I wonder if they're gonna be the people who are more committed. Okay. Now, again, there's the elderly, the at risk, who shouldn't be coming. And honestly, they may never come back. So I'm not talking about them. I am talking, as you said, about the cultural, or we could call them casual Christians. It's going to separate them. It'll be interesting.
Well, and I even think the next handful of weeks will be really interesting, because for most of this year, we've had no normalcy, right? There's been nothing that's been normal. But now that kids are going back to school, a lot of people are back in the office. Maybe just when there's a little bit of a routine that sets back in, maybe church will become part of that routine that they're used to. It's impossible to know, but I wonder if for these past several months, since there's been nothing normal, it's been easier to let that slide just because there's not a routine. I don't know. We'll see. But.
So one of the questions that we're deliberating as staff is, has what we've been doing, the way we've been doing it, has that been the best way? So church for most of America is defined as you go to a big service and you worship, you hear a sermon, you apply it, and you go back and try and live it out. There's kids programming, whether it's Sunday morning or Wednesday night. There is life groups or small groups. There's Sunday school. There's older age groups. There's interest-based groups. I mean, church as we've done it has been meeting together in big groups or small groups in all kinds of ways. It's always and only been face-to-face. And so how do we lead right now a church of 1,000 when only 350 are coming to church? What do we do? How do we disciple them now? Do we focus on the ones who come to the big room? Do we focus on, I mean, how do we in kids ministry disciple third graders who aren't here? Now, we're starting kids worship this Sunday, but it's going to be a smaller number. And so it's just a question that, as far as I know, every single pastor and leader is asking. How do we do church in this new culture?
And like you said, there's no playbook for it. And we're all guessing and trying things week to week the best we can, and things change. And it's crazy.
In the end, discipleship is done formally and publicly. So we teach Bible studies, we teach life groups, we teach Sunday schools, we teach in church, we preach. It's done formally, like didactic. That's a really biblical and right way to transmit what discipleship is. But discipleship has always also been face-to-face. And that's been the disconnect in these since March. Is there's been no face-to-face. And so it's just been very challenging and interesting. We're still trying to find our way. So Matt, let's talk a little about church attendance.
Okay, I'm ready.
So about 3, 4, 5 years ago, church growth experts, prognosticators, church culture gurus started talking about the reality of part-time attendance, and that churches need to find a better way to measure whether or not they're succeeding. Historically, Sunday attendance was a more accurate measurement of one of the measurements of health.
Yep.
But 3, 4, 5 years ago, they were all saying that the committed churchgoer now goes 2 out of 5 times.
Yep.
So you've got more people coming less frequently, or the same number of people coming less frequently.
Yep.
And so they were saying you measure by engagement. Mm-hmm. So if you want to measure whether you're really making disciples, you try and measure not Sunday morning attendance, because that's no longer as accurate, but now you measure how many people are, and there are ways of doing, reading their Bible. You can do that through surveys, or engaged in serving somewhere, engaged in attending a small group, engaged in a service project. So the idea of church attendance has already been on a reevaluation mode. Mm-hmm. But now we're in a different phase.
Yep.
Churches, depending on the stats or who you listen to, anywhere from 10 to 30 or 40% at best. Mm-hmm. Smaller rural churches in counties that haven't been hit as hard by COVID tend to be a higher attendance than churches in counties that have been hit by COVID, or urban churches. But in churches in our kind of culture of First MB and Wichita, it's 20 to 35%. And we're probably, last week, I didn't even get it, but maybe 350. But we're right at 30, 35%. So the question is, what's going to happen? Mm-hmm. Are we going to retain that level for months and months? I'm hearing from the church gurus, the experts, the cultural experts, that it's going to be years, if ever, that churches get back to their pre-COVID attendance with the same people.
Yeah.
Now, they might eventually get back to, for us, the 900 to 950. Mm-hmm. We might get back to that, but it won't be with the same people. Because there's going to be a significant swath of people who don't come back, who used to attend here. They just, like you mentioned earlier, they stop coming for because of shelter at home, and then they are either lazy and they just stay home, and they become lifelong online church people, or because of health or immune deficiency or other, age or whatever, they're home. But regardless, they're saying no churches will get back to pre-COVID attendance with the same people.
Yeah.
And most churches either will never get back to that attendance with new people, or it'll be a long time.
Yeah.
And so it's very interesting that we could be at the 300 to 400 to 500 for months and months and months.
Yep.
And how do we do church when supposedly we've got 1,200 people that call this church their home? How do we disciple them? Very challenging, very interesting.
And the hard part too is, I know, like we're in the midst of this forward campaign, right? So we're doing a building campaign, and the good news is that giving has been pretty solid. Like we're a little bit behind where we'd like to be, but all things considered, like you and I get those reports, and we're doing fine. And so a lot of people, even if they're not choosing to come here, they're still choosing to give, which again, that's an interesting stat.
And they're praying, and they're trying to live their lives for the glory of God. And so, what I don't want the good folks listening to is thinking I'm all ramped up and angry and disappointed and everyone's bad. No, this isn't bad. This is just our reality. And I can attest that our church staff and our leadership board, we don't look at this with a defensive or judgmental, that's all, This is just our new normal. And we've got to figure out how to do church in a COVID world.
Yep. And I know one thing you talk about, Brent, and I don't know if we have too much time to get into this now, but we probably should dive in a little bit deeper sometime. But your definition of church is not watching online. We can again, maybe we'll barely scratch the surface because we're running out of time already. But so while that is true, that our preference is that people would come together, and that is how you define church, as people gather together in the same room. So that is true. But what's also true is that we care a lot about online, and we've invested quite a bit in making our online services the best that we can do. A lot of my week now is getting ready for online church on Sundays. And so there's this weird balance and this dichotomy of, we want people in the room, but we also are really doing our best to make everything available online and the best that we can. We do stuff like this. We did the thing with Matt last night, and we're trying to do as much as we can online, and not just propping up a phone on a Bible in the front row. We're doing the best we can to make it a really quality experience. So you want to talk about that a little bit?
I'd love to. So I am really, really committed to elevating our online experience. I absolutely believe that in order for us to, as the First Chronicles says, the men of Issachar, one of the tribes of Israel, they understood the times and they knew what they should do.
Mm-hmm.
We understand the times enough to know that the digital world we have to engage the digital world.
Yep.
And it's not like the online folks are the hated stepchild or the disenfranchised or the pushed to the gutter. They're less valuable. So we have put considerable money into upgrading our cameras. We have to do that. I want to do that. We're going to be elevating a staff person from part-time to full-time, recommending that for next year. It's part of our recommended budget, I think. And so I am 100% committed to the need to throw energy and focus into the digital church, into the online church. And I don't want people to think that, they're just that, I don't want that. You are right that my understanding of the Bible is that the word for church, ecclesia, is not a religious word. It simply means an assembly of people gathered for a purpose. And so I've said this to the church. I've said, if you have a group of people at Coke Arena, that is a church. I mean, that's the Greek word. It's an assembly of people gathered for a purpose.
Yep.
And so in that sense, the word church requires people to gather together for a common purpose. So a small group is church. It's because the common purpose is for the glory of God, for training, for teaching, for fellowship, for worship. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what many people legitimately defend is that even though the 300 people that are watching online aren't physically together, they are a church. You see, they are a group assembled for a common purpose. It's not. Now, I don't want to lock Jesus into his words, but so I just make that point to say that there's a sense in which when you watch a service, you're worshiping God and you're sitting under the teaching of a sermon, God's word.
Yep.
But I just sometimes want to say, I'm not sure if that's church. That's a really good thing to do. And we're pouring lots of money and effort and value into the digital world of church. So whatever I say, I don't want to diminish that.
Right.
I also don't want to diminish what is our created purpose, introvert or extrovert. Among them, that we are face to face. God did not create us to grow into his likeness without gathering with God's people.
Yeah.
I will fight to my death on it. He expects us and wants us to gather with his people. When you're online, you have a harder time encouraging, exhorting, loving, listening to each other. There's no dynamic of relationship that can happen as well online, in my opinion, as face-to-face. So I try and walk that tightrope.
Yeah,
I'm all for it. I believe in you and what you do, and I'm a big supporter. I'm just trying to figure out, I don't want them to settle.
Yeah.
Especially when they have the ability, the health, the whatever to gather together. I don't want laziness to relegate people to no longer gathering with people.
Yep.
But we're going to throw everything we can into the digital world. Yep. Hey, in a couple minutes, I want you to give some stats.
Okay.
And basically pre-COVID, shelter at home COVID, and now we're meeting in person COVID. And just, we won't go deep, but give us a glimpse of the online experience.
Yep. So really quickly, I get a lot of questions about how many people are watching online, or how many people are, on YouTube or Facebook or whatever. And really quick, it's hard to answer that question really easily, because YouTube and Facebook count a view if you watch for 3 seconds. So if you're scrolling on Facebook, stop, keep going, that counts as a view. And so whenever we give these kind of numbers, we want to be honest. We don't want to inflate our numbers just because we technically could. We could say that a lot of people are watching us online because they stopped for a few seconds. But so the best way that I've found to try to give some like online attendance numbers with some integrity is we count how many hours are streamed every week. So sort of the equivalent of sitting in a room for an hour. So maybe it's true, maybe they didn't watch the whole service, but to me, that's the highest integrity way to count online attendance is 1 hour of watching content. So pre-COVID, about 100 hours a week was the average. So about 100 hours a week, people were watching worship services online, either Facebook or YouTube or Vimeo. They were downloading a podcast. I guess those are the only options back then. So the 100 was average before COVID.
And that's per week. And so at a minimum, that's 100 people. And if there's a family of 5 watching the 30-minute sermon, that's it. So 100 hours a week, which reasonably was 100 to 200 people.
Easily.
100 to 150. Whatever. Okay.
Now shelter at home.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, that 100 would be a very conservative number. So yeah, that's with integrity the best that I can say. So
okay.
So
shelter at home COVID, what happened?
Yep. So in March, when things started switching up around here, that jumped up to about 446 hours a week was an average for COVID. But then at the kind of the peak at stay at home, we got up to 600 hours a week. So we jumped from 100 hours a week up to 600 hours a week at the peak. And then we reopened at the end of June. So things have kind of, as people are able to come back here, there's fewer people watching online, which makes sense. So it's dropped to 400, and then it was 370. And then this past month in August, we were back up to about 400 hours. So we're still 4 times higher than we were pre-COVID, which is good. But obviously we're down from the peak when nobody was able to join us. So
right.
You've been interested about church online numbers.
And we've been averaging 300 to 350. I think one of the weeks recently was 380. But we're having a solid 300 to 350 in person, and then 400 hours, which if it's 1.5 people per screen average, I mean, we're still having a lot of people participating in our worship and our sermons. So, Matt, why don't you transition to a new idea we have to potentially, I'll use the word replace or put a pause on or whatever, the Midweek Rewind, and give us a little glimpse of that, and then we'll probably have to close it off for today.
Yeah, we're almost out of time already, but so yeah, so Brent and I didn't look before we started here today, but it's been about a year. I think this is our 48th episode, so I think we took a couple weeks off for travel and things like that. So we've been doing this about a year, and we started it as just a grand experiment, right? Like if you and I hop on here, would anybody pay attention? Would anybody listen to what we ramble on about for 30 minutes? And so it's been a lot of fun. And I mean, I really enjoy it. I think you do too, Brent. And I know we've got some people who join us on a regular basis. So this is kind of an interesting time for us to reevaluate a little bit, especially during this series, since we are kind of already doing a midweek rewind on Wednesdays with Matt, it doesn't really make sense for you and I to do the same thing like 12 hours later, right? And so that's why we had a different conversation today. And yeah, there's been a couple ideas that I've been kind of floating around. You and I have talked about other kind of online video, digital things that we can try. And we love this show, and we might end up going back to what we were doing before. I'm not sure yet, but since a lot of people obviously aren't able to watch in the middle of the day, and I understand. I mean, we're competing with Netflix, Brent. If people are going to sit down and watch something for 30 minutes, there's a lot.
We're not bothered that the viewership is declining. Everything has a shelf life. We've enjoyed this, and as Matt said, we're flirting around with a sermon recap that goes online that's much shorter, and some different options. And so we are planning on a pause. We don't know what the future is, but for certainly the next month or two or three or four or more, and it could end up permanent. Next week, we're going to do the midweek rewind, but then the pause will kick in. We're going to be implementing some other stuff.
Yep.
And so we're just trying to make good use of everybody's time, and we're always open to anything. But we're planning on a pause after next Thursday.
Yep. And if you're watching now, later, or if you're listening to the podcast, and if you have ideas of what you would like to see, we are all open to that. So jot it in the comments wherever you're watching or listening. Shoot me or Brent an email. You can find our email addresses on the church website. Like Brent said, we're committed to digital, and we've got the equipment and the time and the people that can pull stuff off. So if you have ideas of don't kill it, we love this, don't take it away, let us know. Or if you have ideas of things that we can shift or change to make it more valuable to you, we are all ears and always open to that feedback. So all right, and with that, I think our 30 minutes is up. So Brent, anything else you want to wrap up with today?
No, this Sunday is on disciplining our kids, and so tune in for that. And we've got next week, we'll be back, and we're always so grateful for all of you who are listening.
Yep. So yeah, please do join us Sunday, back Wednesday night with Matt Gallagher. Again, really quick, the AMA, the Ask Me Anything. If there's any young couples watching, go to firstsimbychurch.org/AMA. You'll learn everything you need to know. It's a free meal, free childcare, and it's a cool thing that I think we're also starting off here with this series. So, all right, with that, I think we'll wrap it up. Brent, thanks for your time today.
You too, Matt. Everybody have a great week.
Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for joining us today. Matt and Pastor Brent go live on the First MB Church Facebook page every Thursday at noon. If you can't watch live, the archive is available anytime on Facebook, YouTube, or the First MB app. If you prefer to listen on the go, you can also subscribe to the podcast by searching for the Midweek Rewind in your favorite podcast provider. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on the Midweek Rewind.